Hey friends, it's your pal Mike Shea from Sly Flourish here with another episode of Sly Flourish's Lazy GM Prep. In this show, I go through steps from Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master while preparing for my Sunday role-playing game. In this case, I am running a Shadowdark RPG campaign, I don't know how long it's going to be, called The Gloaming, which is based on the Cursed Scroll 1 zine published by Arcane Library for Shadowdark, for the Shadowdark RPG. This show, like all of the work of Sly Flourish, is brought to you by the patrons of Sly Flourish. Patrons get access to the City of Arches sourcebook, Uncovered Secrets Volume 1 and 2, a dedicated Discord server, a monthly Q&A, and a whole lot more. To the patrons of Sly Flourish, thank you so much for your outstanding support. So I've now run my first full non-zero level Shadowdark adventure with first level characters doing first level things for an entire session. It's really my third session of Shadowdark, but it was my first full non-zero level gauntlet style adventure. And it brought up lots of thoughts. It has made me really think about role-playing games. It's really made me think about running Shadowdark and how I typically run games, what the lazy DM style is like, what works, what doesn't. We're going to talk all about that kind of stuff today while we dig into my prep for my game today, but also kind of thinking about what happened in the last session, because I have lots of thoughts about it, and we're gonna dig into those. In the last session, the characters had made their way to the ruined Watchtower. So this is the area map for the mini campaign setting known as the Gloaming, which is available in Cursed Scroll 1, the zine from one of the three kind of Shadowdark zines. And it has a big hex map, and in the first hex that I decided I was going to start the campaign was in this place called the Ruined Watchtower, which you can see there right in area 102 in the upper left corner. And there's no real story about it, right? There's not a lot there. So I was like, I kind of want to add my own little story to it. So I sort of tied it to this idea of the Marrow guy. This creature called the Marrow Fiend, a wolfish hulk of razor bone and sinewy muscle. Black marrow tree sap drips from its jaws and the gaps in its bony plating. I'm having trouble even understanding exactly what that's like, but maybe that's better. Maybe like the idea that we can't really explain exactly what it looks like makes it scarier and stuff. It can do devouring. It can, devour and sap. 2 claws plus 7 to hit, 1d10 each. That's very lethal. And sap gout, near line. So really cool idea. So I was like, we're going to take this idea of the Marrow Fiend, which has ties to the bandits as well. There's a whole bandit camp, and the bandits are sort of tied into the Marrow Fiend. And so I definitely want to tie that in, and I did. So instead of it just being the ruined Watchtower, it was a tower that included the whole concept of this idea called the Marrow Fiend. And I've got some really kind of fun imagery that I want to put into the dungeon. So the characters met with a bunch of bandits. They fought some bandits. They had a bunch of shenanigans outside involving a dire wolf that's wandering around the outside of the tower. And they tried to have negotiations with this bandit captain, and she was actually willing to negotiate. But they were like, well, we really don't trust you. And then it ended up in a big bow fight. And we had a caster character who managed to pull off Burning Hands twice and killed 4 of like the 5 bandits with 2 blasts. And that did a significant amount of damage to them. And then they met the dwarf who pretended to be in love with the bandit captain. And the dwarf wasn't in love with the bandit captain. It was just like, no, I was just trying to get them to go down in there to get this weird, creepy idol that exists in the ruins underneath this tower, because it's really dangerous down there. But maybe you guys could go do it. By the way, we need to get this idol because it's really dangerous. And apparently the bandits are trying to get a hold of this. And we don't know why, but also it's really valuable. So that way you kind of have like 2 motivations to get the idol. 1, it's powerful and dangerous. I guess 3, it's powerful, it's dangerous, and it's valuable. So they went down into the ruins beneath. I called it the Shattered Tower of Marrow, and then we have the Tower Ruins of Marrow. And that is pretty good. And this is the map that we're using for this. And I kind of wrote out my inhabitants and things like that. So they made their way down I think I have this in Owlbear Rodeo too. Yeah, so I have this in Owlbear Rodeo, which works out really well. I know that Kelsey, who made Shadowdark RPG, uses Owlbear Rodeo herself. And using the general tokens, I think, works well, because like I don't have time to make tokens for all these guys. And nobody complained. So they went down this main area. They kind of peeked through. They saw that there's a big cavern here, but then they went around through the other door. Lots of discussion about which door they're going to go into. They found, I think these were all dead bodies. These skulls lying here were dead bodies that they found. And this big thing in the corner was an effigy to the Marrow fiend. And then they went back and they were examining a corpse that they had found of one of the bandits, and the corpse bloated up and then exploded, and giant wasps came out of it, which I took right from. There was an Amazon series. What was it called? Oh, God, I can't remember, about them finding weird mammoths in the ice, and everybody got a weird disease, and it was really good. Damn, can't remember the name of it. And so I really like that idea. But that scene brought up I had sort of a crisis of faith, because of the way that happened and the way that I modified what happened, and whether I'm being true to Shadowdark or whether I'm falling back to my traditional ways of running RPGs. And that's something that we're going to talk about today. So that's where it ended. I like to end on cliffhangers, and to them getting attacked by a bunch of giant wasps was a good cliffhanger, and I was pretty excited for that. Now, the one tricky bit is that giant wasps are really hard when they're still first level. And it was kind of a random encounter, and it was a random encounter that was legitimately triggered. So I was rolling every 3 rounds, or every 2 rounds, I think, because it was pretty dangerous down here. And I rolled, but the random roll that I hit was like, dwarves are fixing up a wall down here. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. I want to roll something different. So I didn't roll again. I just went up one and said, oh, hey, giant wasps are making a nest. And I said, okay, the giant wasps are making a mess. And I immediately said, ooh, you know what's cooler? Instead of making a nest in the corner, what if they were actually harvesting the dead body that they had injected, and giant wasps were growing inside these dead bodies? I'm like, that's really cool and creepy and weird, so I'm going to do that. But what that inadvertently had done is that meant that the wasps were right on top of the characters instead of far away. So instead of me rolling on the distance table, which you're supposed to do, I just had it happen right there in front of them. And I'm not going to have the wasps lazily fly away. Now, you can definitely say well, when the wasps get injured, they might flee. And that can work. You know, the idea that the wasps are there, they're dangerous, but they can flee. That's okay. But anyway, my point is they're level 2. I think I rolled to determine the number of wasps, and I rolled 5. And I'm like, 5 is just going to wipe them out. 5 isn't cool. Let's narrow it down to 3. And so I cut it down to 3, which again means I've got my finger on the scale. I'm tweaking things, right? I'm not following the Shadowdark ideals of you roll and you do what happens, but I already wasn't, because I already had the wasps show up right on top of them. Now, I'm pretty sure, again, if I was to have a conversation with Kelsey about it, that she would be like, yeah, right, that's totally fine. Sure, do what's fun. People don't need to hang on to the style of this game so much that you're like, oh, you're violating the principles of Shadowdark if you reduce it from 5 to 3 wasps. But there's a little bit of I want to kind of make sure that I'm understanding how the game is supposed to work, and then I'm bringing some of my ideals over. And we had a little conversation about this in Discord, and people are like, well, you're just running it like 5e. But 5e doesn't even run that way. That's still me. That's just the way I run games. It's not necessarily how 5e runs games. 5e doesn't say, oh yeah, make sure to tweak the number of monsters based on the situation or based on the pacing of the game. That's my advice, right? Is that you tweak the number of monsters based on the pacing of the game. So, and that's what I did. And there's another thing, which even 3 wasps at level 2 is going to be pretty hard for five characters that are first level. Now, the nice thing is that the giant wasp doesn't necessarily kill characters. It could poison them, and then they could fall unconscious and maybe get, they could wait, one of them could wake up while the other ones are being harvested, and maybe they're being deadly, but they essentially could get a second chance rather than just being wiped out outright by the giant wasp. Now, somebody might die, and that's okay. People are supposed to die in Shadowdark. So, yeah, so all of that sort of brought up this idea of what should we be dorking with? What should we not be dorking with? What's true to the style of the game, and where are we bringing in our mannerisms, my style, and is it getting in the way? I don't think my style gets in the way. I think I'm pretty confident, looking at the game, reading the game, having run a couple of sessions, I'm pretty sure I could run this like I run any other RPG, and it would be totally fine. But I also want to make sure that I'm getting the gist of how this is going to run before I put too much of my own ideas on there. And some of my ideas are really straightforward. There's a house rule that I'm going to do just because it's I've got enough bookkeeping, and there's a fair bit of bookkeeping that occurs in this game. So one of the things I'm not going to track is they don't call it inspiration. I think they call it luck. I think it's called luck in this, and everybody's going to start with 1. So at the beginning of every session, everybody gets 1, and then I don't have to worry about divvying them out as often as the book states. I can just, maybe on occasion it will happen, but I'm not, and then they can only have one, same way as inspiration. That's just one thing that just makes my life a little easier. I already do that way in 5e, and it works a lot better in 5e when they already start with it, and that way I don't have to worry about it, because I got enough to worry about. I'm busy. I'm busy doing things. So that is where it began. One of the things that I want to talk about today as well, while we're digging into this, is what a dungeon design is like for Shadowdark. Like, what is a Shadowdark dungeon design like? And how does that fit with the style that I use to run dungeons and to design dungeons? And then there's a little bit I think a little bit of a difference there as well that we're going to examine. So I'm going to start a new session planning template. Today is the 3rd. And we have our characters. Click on the characters. Bugjuice, Buckminster Bohannon, a dwarf wizard adept, was a wolf child, smartest dwarf to ever walk among the realms, a touch cowardly, scraggly beard, young, and with a big comb over. A beard comb over. And Bugjuice is the one that managed to pull off 2 burning hands and did really well. Sirwin, an elf priest, seeker, outcast, came to the Gloaming looking for a new community. Priest of Geti, the elf god, seeking a new community. Generally looks average, a little rough, between sources of bathing. We have Daisy, a goblin thief thug. Morrigan Nightweaver, elf warlock, who follows Shun the Vile, the mother witch, and is branded as such. Her mother was burned at the stake at Marrow's hold, and then the hold branded Morrigan and shunned her with the mark of sin, so everybody would know who she is. Her goal is to raise her magical powers, get some money, and survive. She's thin and tall and looks like a little bit like a lich. She's bringing whenever she walks around, you hear the rattle of dry bones. Thalos, a hero of the day, dwarf priest healer, young for a dwarf, a bit naive, an acolyte of Tyrachnis. I should probably look up who Tyrachnis is. And things are bad and wanted to get out into the field. Part of a traveling group, but they all died because of him. Aimless and not experienced in the world, in the top world, because he's a dwarf. So those are our characters. And again, the characters are a bit ephemeral. So I'm not digging too deep into the backgrounds of characters and stuff like that. I think it would be fun to look up who Tyrachnis is, though. So we're going to do that in the Shadowdark RPG. They have a gods section, I'm pretty sure. Deities. Maybe it's not Tyrachnis. It's Saint Tyragnis, legendary knight who is the patron of most lawful humans. She ascended to godhood long ago and is the embodiment of righteousness and justice. Yeah, so that's a good. I like that. Like the deities it's 2 pages and it's 250 words, right? That's so. One thing about this game is boy, you're not going to waste a lot of time reading it because there's not much to read. It's really, really fast. It's really quick to read this. We have a new character coming today as well. I don't know anything about him, so we're going to have a little bit of an intro today to learn what's going on. So one thing I want to make clear, all of this might talk about how to have monsters pop up and do I have my thumb on the scale and all that. None of this is complaining about the game itself. Like the game, if I have any complaints about the game so far, and why would you dig into the complaint? I'm really enjoying it. My players are really enjoying it. We really dig it. And I love the writing and I love the style. I love the simplicity. There are definitely things I notice about it that aren't complaints. It's just the way the game is. And it's not antithetical to how I want to run a game, but the math is really flat. It's way flatter than 5e, but that makes sense. And that's not a problem. It means your die rolls matter a lot more. That's an observation, not a complaint. My only complaints are that there's a bit of bookkeeping, keeping track of the timers on torches, keeping track of rounds from round to round and making sure that you're constantly counting the rounds so that you know when to drop your random encounters, and the always staying in initiative order and kind of walking through. Those are bits of sort of mechanical bookkeeping that you always need to be doing. And it's just added things to everything else that I'm kind of doing. So in that sense, that's taking a bit. Now, one thing is I'm pretty sure, and this again, is this going against the design of Shadowdark? Probably a little bit. I could not track rounds and instead just have random encounters go when I feel like things are getting slow. Now, then you have your thumb on the scale, definitely. And that's hey, you're now making judgments about things instead of having sort of the randomness of the situation roll things. But yeah, that's what I'm for. That's why there's a GM. So I don't know that that's completely oh God, that's the end of everything. And I think you would need to track rounds if you have people that are using timers for things, like if people are casting spells that last a certain amount of time, or they have an effect that lasts a certain amount of time, you'd want to keep track of that. So you could kind of just not pay attention. Same with initiative. Like you could just run initiative the same standard way, which is you don't generally worry about initiative till you're actually in combat, and then you have people roll, because you have people roll anyway. Now, it's not bad to keep a list of the characters and walk through the list of the characters while you're going through scenes, and I do that. I'm probably hanging on to a little tight. You probably don't need to worry about it that much. I run lots of other games, and that part of it, that making the spotlight problem, is not really that big a problem for me. So I don't know how much energy I need to be spending on making sure that we're constantly staying in turn order. So those are a couple things where it's like, I probably don't need to worry about them too much. Maybe I'm hanging on too tight, right? But those are areas where they're fundamental mechanics of Shadowdark that are designed to solve problems that like 5e has, which is that you can definitely have certain players who dominate the spotlight if you aren't continually walking through the list of characters to make sure everybody's getting their time in the sun, including outside of combat or NPC interaction scenes and stuff like that. And then the other one, like the reason why random encounters and turn tracking matters, is to make sure that you're constantly moving the pacing forward. So it's designed because things can get slow if characters are spending too much time doing exploration and stuff like that. Now you have this avenue, this vehicle to kind of keep them moving forward. That's cool. And then the torchlight is the same way. The torchlight is another way to kind of keep them moving forward, keep the initiative going, and keep the speed going. So it's very clear that one of the goals of Shadowdark is that speed, that pacing, that movement. And that's really an answer to games that don't have that movement. But there are other answers too, because my games don't feel particularly slow, I don't think. Sometimes they do. I have some players who are like, oh yeah, that was really long and boring, because but it was really fun for these other people because they got to spend a lot of time doing this kind of stuff they do. So I don't know. But that's probably my only complaint right now is really that. I do think also that characters are really, really weak. And when you're rolling for hit points and you get like 2, boy, anything can knock you out. And I guess that's the idea, but that feels really flat to me. Hit points or something. If I was house ruling, if I was like, I'm going to dive in with house rules, starting with max hit points at level 1 would probably be a big one. And then maybe letting people take the average hit points instead of having to roll for hit points would be another one. But I might be a dick and say it's average minus 0.5 rather than plus 0.5. So instead of 5th edition, which gives you that average plus a half a point, like if you have a d6 for your hit die, you get 4, I would make it 3. And that way it's like, well, it's a little less than average, so you can roll instead of taking the average, but the average is a little less than the average. I don't know. Strong start, giant wasps. A new character joins the group. Where to next? That's our strong start. Scenes, the continued exploration of the ruins, the tower ruins of Marrow. Recovery of the idol, and it'll be the idol of the Marrow Lord. Is that what that guy was called? The Marrow Fiend. That's cool. I think it's going to be really spiny and spiky. Return to, and what is the name of the town? Wardenwood. Return to Wardenwood. And then we're going to try the downtime. Spend that gold. And then I want to have some options for the next adventures. And I want to pick 3. This is something we should probably spend a good deal, not a good deal, but like a fair bit of time on today in our prep. This is that thinking, they call it like thinking 2 horizons out. I don't know if they'll even necessarily get past this dungeon today, but they may. And if they do, I want to have an idea of what the next 3 options are. So I'm probably going to follow a model for the campaign here that I found in Dragon of Icespire Peak by Chris Perkins. That was the D&D Essentials Kit adventure. And I really like this model. And the way the model works is you have an introduction starting adventure that gets everybody kind of familiar with what's going on. They can go to town, and then you offer up 3 other places that they can go. And they pick one of those, and then they complete that, and they come back and they have another place of those 3 that they can go. And then they go to that one. And then the third one is thrown out. So they've basically avoided one of them twice. That one is thrown out, and then 3 new ones come out. And that way you always sort of have like a choice between 2 to 3 adventures. It's actually very, it's very conservative in the total number of locations that you need to create, because you're only throwing out 1 out of every 3 that they don't go to. And then 2 of the 3 they end up going to. So you're not wasting a lot of effort. Most of the stuff you create, you end up running. And it gives a lot of options and a lot of good times for the characters. So I think one of the options could be investigate the bandit place. Let's see. The outlaw camp, the Redthorn outlaw camp. Why do they want the idol? So that's one good clear mission. They could visit Drusilla. That could be an option, is visit Drusilla's hut. I don't know if there's like a full adventure there. Although they could, Drusilla could be particularly interested in what they're doing. That could be kind of fun. Did I spell it right? Is it with a Z? Drusilla, yeah. So that's an option that they could do. And what else? Let's take a look at our map. So Wardenwood is 307. What's 108? The Mossy Menreers. So this could be tied. Mossy standing stones form a circle. Each new moon, the earth inside sprouts dandelions of pure silver that Drusilla harvests. That's kind of fun. 203. Where's that? The Marker Stone. Tall pointed stone bears an ancient mark in a spiral shape. In the earth, beneath it, 4 whites lie in stone coffins. Each has a different gemstone in its sewn mouth. Pearl, emerald, ruby, and sapphire. Slotting these gems into 4 worn grooves in each of the cardinal points of the Marker Stone opens a magical portal to the Fey Realm. That's kind of cool. I don't know if that's a place they need to visit right now. There's a troll cave. Barbarog. Addicted to toxic oil in the Marrow tree roots. I think that will be a fun another quest forward. Outlaw camp. We have Uncle Grigor. Stone Circle, 807. So we probably don't want to go too far out. That Stone Circle. They could visit the Stone Circle, and I might change it to commune with, and we'll pick the god that one of the players chose. We could to commune with the gods, right? We'll just say to commune with the gods. And that would open up a new quest, but there could be like somebody else there. We could do some other stuff there. So that offers some. Is there any other kind of dungeony sort of places? Let's just take a look further and see if there's any other dungeony sort of places. Uncle Grigor, 209 that's the Troll Cave. Yeah. 702 is Bittermold Keep. We could send them off to. So I think Bittermold Keep is intended. Is that intended for first level characters? I don't know that it says first level. So we could another quest. Maybe I don't know if we want to put this here, but our dwarf friend, whose name is what? Danelle Corrent. Danelle Corrent is the name. Knows of even greater treasure in Bittermold Keep. So that's 4 kind of potential options about where they could go afterwards. My hope is that near the end of a session, that's when they would make a choice like this, and then that would give me a little time and energy to sort of find maps and come up with stuff. Although I could probably improvise these pretty easily. So that works. So what are some secrets and clues? I actually just wrote an article about this for Monday. We can look at what secrets and clues we had last time that we did not use. Redthorn bandits serve Greaves Redborn and outcast knight of St. Yudris. I don't know if they've done that. Danelle Corrent Lovestruck isn't really in love. Yes. Trying to get them to kill off the monsters to get the idol. Long ago, a cult of Black Marrow worshipped a powerful creature called Unduluk beneath this tower. We did not learn that. The Green Knights, the predecessors, I did not spell predecessors right, of the Knights of St. Yudris, sacked the tower and put the Marrow cult to the sword and torch. The Marrow cult were shapeshifters like the Thing. The idol of Black Marrow is very valuable and potentially very dangerous. They did learn that. Greaves Redthorn sent Rianne Dusklover. They did learn that. Rianne found out that Danelle knew the location of the idol. She had hoped that the dwarf recovered it. The hopes, yep. The Mire Castle ruins, soaring stronghold of the Green Knights, now sits deserted. Hazy light filtered through the shattered stained glass windows. Slain wires. I think they learned that, and I think I screwed it up, but I think I managed to pull it back in time. Let's see. The cursed Knights of St. Yudris are... The Knights of St. Yudris are cursed knights who walk the path of St. Yudris, the unholy and possessed. They embrace the darkness in order to fight it, cleansing evil. They did learn that. So there's a handful of these. We can grab these 3. Drop those into my secrets. And we will grab... I think they did learn that one, so I don't need that one. And the Redthorn Bandits. They know that one too. So really there's just those three that they learned. Unduluk is a powerful creature drawn from an unholy realm. If you had like a thing called the Marrow Fiend, could the unholy realm itself be called the Marrow? The world of the Marrow is bleeding into this world. You can smell it in the air and feel it in the deep roots of the marrow trees. I think that's fun. The Green Knights, I think I am repeating myself a little bit. Green Knights are predecessors to the Knights this year. They sack the tower and put the Marrow cult to the sword and torch. The Marrow cult didn't just burn, they melted. Their bodies are different than typical mortals. That's a cool one. More than one unholy influence curses the Gloaming. A land cursed by 3 foul gods. The foul gods are Unduluk, the Marrow Fiend, the, Mugdalblub, the Primordial Ooze, Mugdalblub, and the Willow Man is kind of the Twisted Willow Man. Whoops, that's the wrong one. What is this? The murderous Fae, the Willow Man, the murderous Fae Guardian. And so there's 4, because there's also the creature that the Saint Yidris is buried beneath Saint Yidris, the Cursed. We'll call him the Cursed King, or the Cursed Saint. Yeah, so that's cool. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I need 3 more secrets. What other secrets could they learn down in the depths? The Marrow cultists opened a gateway to Marrow, though the Green Knights attempted to close the gate. It remains open like a festering wound. What would it take to close the gate? Only what would they have to do? The idol is the key to the doors, to the gates of Marrow. Can be used to both open and close them. At least 2 gates exist. 3 gates exist. 1 in the ruins, 1 in the bandit, in the grandfather tree, in the bandit camp, and 1 in the cave of the werewolf. Isn't there a 6-eyed werewolf? The Bone Cave is in 103, but wasn't there a 6-eyed? Where's the 6-eyed werewolf? Make sure I get this right. Outlaw Camp. 16 wolves, the Wolf Cave, 1409, far to the east, far to the southeast. 1 wolf is favored by the demon prince Alma. I think we might change that to another, or what's to say the demon prince Almazat isn't from Marrow? Is there an Almazat? Wolf-headed archdemon with 6 eyes and 6 horns, Almazat seeks to wrest the sands of the ages from his father, Kytheros. Yeah, so I was saying 1 is the gate of Almazat, and the wolf caves near the wolf caves are 1409, near the henge, near the corrupted henge. Yeah, that's cool. So we got like some secrets and a quest about 3 gates, the gates that are connecting this world to the world of Marrow. The world of Marrow is the home of Almazat, home of the 6. We have information about Almazat. There. Cool. So we got some good stuff. I don't know if they're going to investigate the Redthorn Outlaw Camp or Druzilla's Hut or the Stone Circle, which are kind of the next paths that they would take, which I guess are, they're not like, those aren't going to be, the Stone Circle to commune with the god. Are there any dungeons here? 807, is that where the whites are? No. Yeah, no. So there is no dungeon there. So are those enough for a day of adventure? Investigating the Redthorn Outlaw Camp is an overland area. Druzilla's Hut is an overland area. The Stone Circle is an overland area. And then there's Bittermold Keep, of course. So I probably don't need to do it right now. But at some point I could be like, okay, well, what are the other dungeons of this place? I guess you don't really bother to build out a dungeon until you know that you're going to go there. But I could do a little fantastic location here, and we'll create a new place. And we'll say Dungeons of the Gloaming. That way I've got a list of potential dungeons to fill out later. So we have the Troll Cave, We can actually go right through the list. It's just this is a bit of extra homework. Like, it's not really helping with my next session, but it's helping me get my hands around what's going on in the future, and then it makes it easier for me to drop in quests and then decide which ones I'm going to fill out with an actual thing. The Mossy Menrears, I don't think that one does not have a dungeon. The Marker Stones, 203. That could have a crypt, or that could have cairn. What are they called? Yeah, crypts beneath cairns. A Troll Cave. The Outlaw Camp probably doesn't have a dungeon. There could be a dungeon underneath the Outlaw Camp. Let's see. Troll Cave is 209. The Outlaw Camp is 509. And we could have the dungeon would be like the Rotted Roots. That could be a fun, like the roots are all rotted out underneath, and it's down there is where the archway is that needs to be closed with the idol. Bitter Mold Keep, of course, 702. Uncle Grigor, probably not. Stone Circle, probably not. Haldren's Tower. Yeah, so Haldren's Tower could be a dungeon. A little bit of magic there. The Barrow Mounds, 910. Where's that? Dozens of low-rolling hills mark the tombs of ancient denizens of the forest, missing the bogs, royal of these burial sites. That's right. Yeah, Barrow Mounds sounds great. I love Barrow Mounds. Whoops. Mushroom Grove, probably not. Bone Cave, Marin's Hold. No, that's a village. Boot Hill. Nope. Stilt Orc Village. Nope. Mire Castle Ruins. Yes. 1308. Lots of dungeons to explore. Ancient Cairn. 1401. The Mud Pit. 1403. This is probably a waste of time. I have one page to go. Greywall Priory. Wolf Cave. A lot of dungeon opportunities here. The Cultist Camp could have an old chapel. All I basically did was write down all the locations that are listed here. The Corrupted Henge. That's 1510, right? Yeah. The Vile Well. Cool. That is a lot of potential dungeons. So I can kind of fill any of those out. I can add my own maps. I can add my own locations. We can make them essentially, a couple sessions each if we wanted to. I don't think we're going to run all of these, but I think we can. I think we've got room to go. So let's go back to what we should be doing, which is our campaign notes, and see. We've got our strong start scene, secrets and clues, locations. We have the Shadow Tower Marrow and the Tower Ruins of Marrow. NPCs. Rianne is dead, so we can pull her off the list. She was burned up and shot. Matilda Bauer, Danelle Corrent is there. Warren Bullhelm is our Redthorn Doorman. And I have my gods and factions of the Gloaming. There is no lazy encounter benchmark, so we do not need to worry about that. In fact, monsters we're probably not going to worry about. And treasure, we're probably not worrying about here. We're going to yank this whole section here because they're in the location. But we do want to take a look at the location again. Today's actual location, which is the Tower Ruins of Marrow. We'll just call it the Ruins of Marrow. We have our map, as we can see, and we'll bring up, where's my owlbear? So there's the actual map. And so what are in these places? And this is what gets into my question of what is a Shadowdark dungeon design like, and how different is it from traditional dungeon design? I think the answer is it's not really that different. You have a locate, and I think a lot of the ways that I build dungeons, which I'm very comfortable with, fit this style, but there's probably one area that doesn't. So when I think about building out a dungeon, I just went through that list of dungeons. So what would I do if I was going to build out another one of those dungeons? So the first thing you need is a map. I want to have a location. I go to Dyson. I've got 1,000 maps. Dyson has 1,000 maps available. I go find a map that resembles what I'm looking for, and I go with that. Then the first map that I see that fits that kind of situation, I use that map. So you have a map. You then have a history of that map, what used to be going on there long ago, and what's going on there now. So those are two layers that we put on. What's happening there today? What happened there before? What's the history before? What's going on there today? Those are two questions that we ask about the overall location, not specific locations, but the overall location. But both of those help us fill out specific locations. Then we write out what's going on in each of the rooms. Usually one line can do it. Not even one line, a couple words can usually tell you what's going on in any given area of that map. And we write that down. And the way I do it, and this one is, for example, because numbering is a pain in the ass, so I don't number them. I just kind of list them out. And I say, like, we have a decrepit cellar in the old storeroom. murdered cultists in the looted storeroom, the preparation room. Then I have the central underground chamber of worship. Like, these are all the things that I did when I went through the place to see what was going on here. And I'm going to go review this again because I might want to change it a little bit. So we have what each room is. And then in my traditional style of dungeon development, I have 3 types of encounters, I think. Encounter type 1 are fixed encounters. What encounters occur in a location, period. There's things that are there. There's inhabitants in that room, period. And they're only in that room, and that they don't move around a lot. Then I have, in Shadowdark, I think, and I don't usually do this actually in my dungeons, because I don't really use random encounters in my dungeons, but you have random encounters, which is after so much time has passed, you roll to see if a group of monsters shows up in a particular location. Shadowdark makes sense. They do that a lot with Shadowdark. And then I have these sort of, what was I referring to them as? They're not fixed encounters. They're movable encounters. And the idea of a movable encounter is you have a group of monsters or a group of inhabitants, and they could be in different chambers. Now, maybe they move around because inhabitants move around, but maybe we're moving the MacGuffin. And an example would be, I don't think I'm going to do it in this one, but an example would be, we know that we want the characters to get the idol. We know that the idol exists in a certain chamber in this room. Now, what if I put it in the furthest chamber in the room? It could take them forever to find it. And maybe we're all getting bored, and maybe we just want the dungeon to be over. And then maybe I move that to a new location. We call that the moving MacGuffin. They call these keys in Numenera, right? This idea that you have movable keys. You have keys that are required to move the story forward or move the whole campaign forward or whatever. And you can put that wherever you want. You can decide where it goes. An example would be, if we're looking at this map here, I could put it in this chamber down here to the south, right? That looks like a good chamber where the idol would be, right? The idol of the Marrow Lord would be sitting on this pedestal in this place. But what if instead it was here in this pool? It could be there too, right? It's reasonable. That could be in either of those locations. What if the spiders took it and they've got it up here and they're worshiping it? Right? I can move it where I want it to be. I can decide where it goes. What if I you get really bored and it's down here, right? It's like buried in this rift. I can move it wherever I want. Is that bad? Is that putting your finger on the scale and changing things? Is that, are you violating the principles of a dungeon where the characters are using their wits to figure out where things are because you're moving the MacGuffin around? Some would argue, yeah. Some would say that's all the choices are false. Like, all of their decisions about what direction that they're going in the dungeon are false if you're moving the MacGuffin to wherever they happen to be going or not going, right? What's the point in making those choices? You're peeling it back, and that's a good argument, right? That's not a foul argument. The other side of the argument is, why are you making players go through boring ass stuff when you can just move the MacGuffin and make things more exciting and interesting? So, I don't think there's a right answer. And I think we each have to kind of decide where it goes. I always like to think of things like that as like a spring. You probably want to have one location where it goes, but as the GM, you have the duty to help try to make a fun game. And if making a fun game means I'm going to move the MacGuffin to make the game more fun because we're just tired of crawling through this thing, then you can move the MacGuffin. It's okay. But otherwise, you should assume it's going to be in a certain place. That's the same way I think about like changing monster hit points on the fly. I'm not a fan of like hit points are completely arbitrary and you don't even need to pay attention to them at all. I like to know what the average is, but I might shrink them a little bit if I think it's going to be more fun in the game. It's got a little spring. It's a dial with a spring in it, and it springs to average. It springs to a certain location, but you can turn it, and maybe it turns harder if you go further in the dial. So that's the way I feel about it. But I feel like the intention of Shadowdark is that you have fixed encounters, and we can dissect these design ideas by looking at Shadowdark dungeons. We can look at dungeons that Kelsey has designed and say, what was her process for thinking about this? What's the outcome, and then what can we assume about the process? And I think that the outcome is and typically this is how everybody tends to think of dungeons, or many times, that you have basically two kinds of encounters: fixed encounters in specific locations, and random encounters which occur randomly, and that's it. I kind of have this other third one of movable encounters. The idea that you might have certain groups that could exist in different places, but we can move them around. And the example for this location is like, I've got my tower locations here. So let's take a look through these because I actually need to run them. today. Got a game to run. They've already found the decrepit cellar and old storeroom. They already found the murder cultists. They're in the preparation room. They got into the preparation room. That's where they found dead cultists here that had been killed by the Green Knights. And then the wasps burst out of the bodies. We have a central underground chamber of worship with mounds of dead, burned bodies, melted bodies, and signs of battle. I think... So an example of a moving MacGuffin, one of the things is like, where is the archway to Marrow? Do I want to put it in this chamber here? Which could work. I could move it further to the south and have it down here. And that like the archway was buried under the ground and dug up by the Marrow cultists. That would be cooler. I think I like that. I think I like that better. There's a chance they could miss it. And that wouldn't be great. I kind of want them to find the archway. And I think so. I have the shattered archway of the Marrow Lord was over on this side. We'll say shattered megaliths. So we have shattered megaliths over there. We have the High Priest chamber and the High Priest audience chamber. Then we have the Ettercap lair. I'm going to change the Ettercap lair to archway, the uncovered archway to Marrow. Then we have the Well of Marrow. We have sacrificial prison cells. And we have the spider lair, which is up here. This one will turn into an Ettercap lair. Inhabitants. We have 6 Ettercaps affixing thin lines of webbing across a passageway with some halflings that tumbled inside. We have sharp stalactites that fall with even the slightest vibration. Where did I get that from? I wonder if I made that up. We have spider swarms. We have, so this is a fixed encounter, right? This last cultist will have like the cult high priests turned into Ichor oozes, which is in Curse Scroll, page 47. Let's take a look at that. How tough are they? Ichor oozes are level 3. They do 2 tendrils. So my question is like, is 2 or 3 better? So if they're level 3, that would be easier than 5 characters. See, this is where, okay, so here's where I'm like gaming the system, right? I want to create a particular type of fight. I want it to be possible for them to defeat it. If it's one creature, it's going to be pretty easy. Even though it's doing 2 attacks, even though it does a d6 each, there's 5 characters that are going to beat the crap out of it. It only has 15 hit points. 2 of them, however, might be too hard. So I could do 2 of them with slightly fewer hit points. And that would be closer. And I think that's what I'm going to do, right? Is that violating the principles of Shadowdark? Maybe a little bit, because like I'm building the monsters around the characters, kind of changing their hit points around a little bit. But I want to have that kind of boss fight, right? And they're the ones that are guarding the idol. The Ichor oozers are the ones guarding the idol. So some other... Now one thing is like, do you want to make your own list of random encounters here? So we could like spider swarms, undead, green knight, skeletons. Are there oozes? Monsters. It must be oozes, right? There's ochre jellies. Those are level 4. Woo. So an ochre jelly actually would be a better, because it's got more hit points. Oh, but it chops and splits. Do they have a gray ooze? They have a gray ooze. Did we already use gray oozes? I don't think I used gray oozes. Spider swarms, undead, green knight, skeletons, gray oozes. What else would be down here? Giant spiders? Ettercaps. What else? Could have a nice one. Lost explorer. Lost bandit. Redthorn. Lost redthorn bandit. So we have our own little like quick random encounter table that we could use if we want. That's a little bit better than rolling the random encounter tables for ruins because you get some weird stuff, but we could do that too. Yeah, we could figure that out. But I think that's probably good enough. So yeah, but that's kind of where I get torn in following the design of Shadowdark and my own style of play. And that is that I usually have my hands on the dials more than I think this game intends for you to have your hands on the dials. So I think my idea is to kind of take my hands off the dials a little bit and go with that randomness. So like spider swarms, like how many spider swarms should there be? Is it 2 to 3? Like what? 2 to 3? How many swarms of spiders might one find? Do they have spider swarms? I don't even know. Yeah. Spider swarms are level 2. All right, so that's pretty tough. So I probably might have 1. And giant spiders are level 3. We probably would only want to have maybe 1 to 2 giant spiders, right? Undead swarms or undead Green Knight skeletons. Let's look at skeleton here. They are level, wow, they're level 2 as well. So I think we'll do like 1d2 on all these guys. An Ettercap would probably just be the 1. We could do an Ettercap plus a giant spider and 1 Red Thorn Gambit. So that feels right. Yeah. I feel like so I feel pretty comfortable with it. I do constantly wonder and question, like, do I have my hands too much on the dials is a big question that I've got. But I think we're fine. I think everything's fine. And we'll see. We'll run, let's see, I can move this to my old session notes. Boop. And I think we're all set. One thing I gotta do while I'm thinking about it is I'm gonna change this cover and upload a file from my Shadowdark. Friends, I want to thank you all for hanging out with me today while I prepared for my Sunday Shadowdark game. If you enjoyed this show and you want more stuff like this, the best way to see all of the stuff that I do is to subscribe to the Sly Flourish newsletter. It's absolutely free to sign up. You get a weekly RPG-related email sent directly to your inbox with links to all of the other work that I do, and you get a free adventure generator PDF. You can also support me directly on Patreon. Patrons get access to all kinds of exclusive materials, previews of upcoming products, a dedicated Discord server, a monthly Q&A, and a whole lot more. It's very reasonably priced. And you can pick up any of my books, including Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, whose steps I use to help prep this game, The Lazy DM's Companion, which is full of random tables to help you build your adventures, and The Lazy DM's Workbook, which is like the book that sits by your table while you're running your game to help give you the tools you need to improvise your game. Thank you all very much. Have a great day, and get out there and play an RPG.